Huh. You guys really enjoyed that video. Well, I guess it's only one thing to do. Greetings one and all. My name is Mace, and welcome to 200 Days Minecraft Modded Hardcore. Like with the previous 100 Days video, I played mainly with Tinker's Construct, but I mentioned at the end that I had plans to try some stuff with new mods. The main mods that I've added are the Create mod and the Extractinator mod. I also installed a few smaller mods which are mainly Tinker's based. Don't want to spoil too much with what's been added. And lastly, were some goals, which were to obtain every unique armor set, not including the customizable armor sets you can make within Tinker's Construct, upgrade my current tools and armor, and beat the Wither. Also, it's been close to a year since the last 100 days. I do apologize for the delay on this. I've had quite a lot happening in the background these last few months, but I have lots of cool stuff later this year. Anyway, that's enough from me. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy. Day 101. Starting off, I sleep day 100 away, and I begin searching for some resources. Resources that I had stored away for the gunpowder farm that I intended to make in the last 100 days. Funnily enough, after having not played this for almost half a year, I forgot where most things were. But I thankfully found where the bags were stored after having watched back the last 100 days. Now with bags in hand, I was off to start making my gunpowder farm to get ready for when I get my elytra. Day 102. Proceeding with making the gunpowder farm, I realized that the block palette I had wasn't the prettiest. But I digress. Following along with the tutorial that I mentioned I would use as reference to build the first parts of the structure. Day 103. As I'm coming around to roughly the halfway point in making this farm, I realize a couple things. One, I needed to spawn proof the area while I'm building on it. Temporarily, of course. And two, I needed to reorganize my inventory as it was just an absolute pigsty. Day 104. I begin to finally build up the walls for the farm. Using stairs, there's some technical shenanigans happening here, but essentially, the stairs create a ring of light around the first layer of blocks on the edge of each platform. I then start to work on the next floor, which carries on to the next day. Day 105. Finally finish constructing the floors needed, trapdoors included, and then finally build the roof. Day 106. Now, it was time for the most tedious bit of this farm. So for those that don't know, for creepers to be able to spawn, they don't actually require 2 full blocks as they just are small enough to fit underneath trapdoors. So that's why I'm placing trapdoors under the roof of the first platform as well as under the actual roof on top. I then place the final piece for the internal bits, which are the slabs, placing them 1 block away from the wall and 2 blocks apart from each other. Day 107. I finally finished the farm. Damn, almost 10 days. There was, however, a bit of trouble getting the farm to start, and that was by removing the torches. It wasn't too challenging, but it was very stressful to know that there would be creepers spawning in my backside in moments time. However, this means anytime I need gunpowder, I just AFK here for a bit and farm creepers for their explosive brains. I do AFK a little bit here and there for some of these 200 days, but not just at this farm, don't worry. Day 108 to 109, and speaking of AFKing, I proceed to spend the next 2 days AFKing for gunpowder. I want to have enough gunpowder to be comfortable when I start flying when I get my elytra. Eventually. Day 110 to 111, and speaking of elytra, I was off to the end to conquer the realm I had managed to access in the last 100 days. I then spent the next day and a bit and busting, just collecting some good loot from the ships and cities as I ventured across the void. Day 112 to 113, after finalizing my end busting shenanigans, I go back home, but to realize I destroyed my spawn. Thankfully, I'm not too far away from my base. I am, however, starting to be wary of my elytra's durability, so I set off to the village north of my base in hopes to get some mending for my wings. I did eventually get it, but the price was ludicrously high, so I gambled on the cycling of the village's trade pool in hopes of something better. I inevitably gave in to the price and bought the book. I know I could have done some zombie magic to get lower trades, but I honestly couldn't be bothered. Day 114. I went back home to see if I could enchant my elytra through the enchantment table to try and get unbreaking, only to realize that I can't enchant my wings through the table. Like, I literally only found this out now, so yeah. That happened. Afterwards, I went through the Nether to collect a mass amount of basalt and magma blocks to be used for a build later on. But in the midst of doing so, I got blasted by a ghast and got knocked into one of those awkward 1 by however deep holes. Suffice to say that I started panicking as I had no clue to get out of this situation. So I quickly paused the game, give myself some time to breathe and think. I then decided to just use some blocks to get myself out of the hot mess. Looking at my health, it wasn't too bad damage-wise, but it was still stressful nonetheless. So for the remainder of the time I spent digging basalt, I made sure to be crouched the entire time. My poor pinky. And to finalize the Nether Realm trek, I finally waypoint the fortress and head back home. Day 115 to 116. Once back home, I start to make preparations to start making my foundry. The next best thing, other than the smeltery. By this, I begin melting down all my magma blocks into my smeltery and put my basalt into the basins to pour the magma onto. Now, because I didn't want this to be a grueling task, I started to utilize Create, one of my favorite mods that I've also found out works amazing alongside Tinkers. And what I do is craft some chutes, place them under the basins, and have them go directly into some chests. Now, you may be asking, Mace, why don't you just use hoppers? Excellent question. Hoppers don't work. They automatically yoink the block you place into the basin straight out. However, chutes don't, I found out. So that's why I'm using them instead. And after some grinding later, I finally have the grand majority of the parts needed. I say this as I later realized I crafted a block variation wrong, and you'll soon see what I mean. Day 117. I take a quick peek at some of the new content I added into this mod pack. It was a lot of new weapons, resources, as well as some upgrades and abilities which I was unable to touch. Like, at all. But with my foundry bits and bobs in hand, I head back into hell to set up something utilizing the blaze spawners. Now within Tinkers, if you build a smeltery or foundry surrounding a mob spawner, you get various different resources. But when blaze die inside one of these structures, they give me their blood, which is needed as fuel for higher tier melting. So I begin to build up my foundry surrounding one of my 2 blaze spawners. It was then later that I found out that I made a chute output instead of a drain output. The key difference is the shape of the output pipe. One looks like a square and the other almost like a circle. And I didn't have the square one, so I had to go back home to craft the drains. Day 118. After making sure I am making the right one this time, I made some drains. Went back to the foundry in the Nether, finalized my foundry, and voila. Blaze blood farm was now complete. Just had to make sure it was fueled to kill the blaze. I then proceeded to AFK next to the farm for the remainder of the day to get as much blazing blood as possible. It took longer than expected as I need to keep refueling the foundry in order to actually keep it active. Now I plan on making 2 blaze blood farms with both the blaze spawners in the area I was in, but 1, I didn't want to go through the whole process of casting scorched blocks with basalt and magma, and 2, I didn't have time to waste. Day 119, AFKing at the blaze blood farm again. I wanted to make sure I had enough buckets of fuel so I wouldn't have to be making trips. Day 120, I start off by repairing my wings at the creeper farm as I was still yet to get Unbreaking 3 for them. I then go off exploring. Okay, I don't know why I grabbed mangrove wood or mud or anything at this time. I can't actually recall using it at all for anything. All I know is I chopped down 1 tree and that was it. Maybe it was just to have on hand for whatever reason. I don't know. I can't recall. Day 121. Still roaming around and exploring more. I pillaged some villages, found a jungle and stabbed myself some melons, which would be useful later on, chopped down a terry tree, and went back to the village I found in the last 100 days to try and bring a copper golem back to life. Nothing happened. I then tried my luck again with the village trade in hopes of something good, but I gave up and left. Day 122. About to make my way home, I found this massive cave leading into a dripstone cavern. Looked cool, but wasn't going to risk it. So I flew back home, repaired my elytra, and started to do some base expanding. My base was heavily overdue for some renovations as to 1. Expand my storage, 2. Build up a foundry inside my actual base, and 3. Just to have a bit more wiggle room. So I start by tearing down the wall that sat next to my existing storage area, as well as do some slight terraforming. Day 123, before I start working on the expansion however, I needed resources. So I was off to dig some sand for glass, and went back to the tiger again from the previous 100 days for some more spruce logs. I then finished off today by repairing my wings yet again. Day 124, I finally begin to work on the base, having all my resources and sugar boxes to help with management. But oh wait, I've forgotten something yet again. I've been all over the show and will continue to be, so try and stick with me. What I forgot was getting enough resources to be able to construct my foundry within my base. So I was off to the Nether again to grab some more basalt and magma blocks. Day 125. After coming back from the Nether, I then proceed to spend the whole day scorched stone casting. Started to build up my foundry, but was still lacking the full amount to finish it up. Day 126, still casting scorched stone, but finally have almost enough to finish up the foundry. Day 127, the foundry's done. Finally! I can now start to work and finalize the base. I start off by doing more terraforming and build up the ground around my base that it currently sits on, and finally build the floor. Day 128, building up the walls and trying to make the surrounding area fit seamlessly into the area around. I don't see myself as a terraformer, like, at all. But what I accomplished while building this new base expansion, I was pretty happy, and to talk building here, I have been watching Good Times with Sky in between playing 200 Days and other various things. And if you know how much of an expert Sky is with terraforming, then I don't need to say much. All I will say is, I took mass inspiration for how he does his terraforming slightly, and put my own little twist on it to make it feel more to my style. My way of terraforming doesn't even come close to doing Scar's work any justice, but just thought I'd share my workflow. Also, Using the glass from the sand I collected earlier, I used some to build over and around the tree that sat in the middle of my floor. I wanted to create like a biosphere looking thing as if to preserve the tree that I hadn't chopped down, and I like it a lot. Finally, I get to the roof, just following the same pattern as I had done in the last 100 days. Day 129. Finishing up the walls, I placed down the glass I had left over to refill on the gaps, as well as getting my storage system finally sorted out. This took half the day, but I started to work on it to at least have it ready for any potential storage. Day 130. Finalizing my storage moving, I then grab any gravel and sand I had laying around and use my Extractinator, which I made some days ago, and used to get any resources that I could possibly get without having to go caving. Afterwards, I start to work on the next and last smelter that was left, which was the alloyer. This is probably my new favorite multi-block of the 4 we have within Tinkers. My only annoyance is that you have to place the metals you want to alloy around the exposed air blocks of the alloyer. I may have to do some experimenting to figure something out. The last thing I did was make some bombs to go do some nether blasting. Day 131, and funnily enough, I start to do some nether blasting, searching for ancient debris and other useful resources along the way. I then spend the entire day trying to figure out how to best repair my iron tier diamond tipped pickaxe. Notice how I said iron tier, not diamond? This is because I later found out that all I needed to repair my stupid pickaxe was an iron repair kit. But because it was diamond tipped, I thought, oh okay, it must need diamond repair kits. If I had just spent a little bit of time experimenting with stuff in previous 100 days, I would have been able to do so much more. But I digress. Day 132 to 133. I continue to nether blast for more ancient debris for a while, then back to the base to empty my smeltery so nothing accidentally alloys with the debris. It also just needed to be cleaned out. But I then realized that in order to melt down ancient debris, I'm gonna need blazing blood as fuel. So I quickly craft another fuel tank, take out the current lava as fuel, go to the nether, AFK for some blazing blood, come back and refuel my smeltery and melt down my ancient debris. Day 134 to 135. Today is a day where I start to customize some tools and armor. Woo! But before even doing so, I need the necessary resources. So with some sand I have, I use it on my Extractinator to get some more ores, mainly gold for casts, and start to get my molds sorted for when I want to make my armor. Using said molds, I cast the first parts of my new armor out of heptazine. I made sure to do my research before what I wanted to use, and I came to the conclusion of using heptazine as the base, and the male parts were going to be manulin. But to make manulin, I needed some debris and cobalt. I melted down some cobalt and placed it in next to my alloyer. I then went off to the nether to extract the molten debris within the blazing blood foundry as I stupidly melted some in there earlier. Getting back home, I put the tank of molten debris on the other side of my alloyer, fueled it, and made some manulin. Casting the male pieces, crafted my armor in full. And I was now rocking some new and improved Tink's armor. All that was left was to upgrade it and such. I then started working on a new set of tools, the first of which being a new pickaxe, being made of heptazine, cobalt, and queen slime, as well as a massic, also being made of the same materials as well. Day 136. I spent back and forth within the nether, gathering materials to start making myself a new weapon. I was needing a lot of ancient debris, obsidian, and cobalt. Cobalt can be found realistically anywhere within the nether, so while I was blasting for ancient debris, I caught myself some cobalt. And thankfully, there was just random pillars of obsidian just sitting in lava. Day 137. With the materials I had gathered from the previous day, I started to melt and alloy them into the necessary bits and pieces I needed. And finally, with having forged a brand new cleaver, I have made my 3 main tools that I will be using throughout the remaining 200 days. Day 138 to 139. I started by repairing my elytra and I was back to the stronghold to actually do some more end busting. Took out a few shulkers, snagged myself some pretty good loot. I then came across a new ore from one of the mods I installed. This was called Kepu, which can be alloyed into a variety of metals. After having come back home, I decided to plant my end slime sapling I got from the first end busting segment I did earlier. Bone meal it up and start to farm some end slime for one of my main goals within these 200 days. But I put that on hold as I want to extract Unbreaking 3 off of some equipment I looted from the end realm, which resulted in not working. I don't know what I was doing wrong. I did what JEI showed. I might need to do some more playing around to see what works. Testing my luck, I tried to enchant my books to see if I could get at least some sort of unbreaking enchantment, and lo and behold, I was actually able to get it. Day 140. Today was when I started to actually get upgrades and abilities sorted for my tools. I start off by heading into the nether to kill some ghasts as I needed their tears to make end crystals for one of the slotless upgrades. I also take this time to kill some wither skeletons for their skulls as to have them ready for when I eventually fight the wither boss. And after After spending the whole day within the Nether collecting ghast tears, I head home and repair my elytra. Day 141. Not having the correct amount of resources to make the end crystals needed, I head to the end, kill a few endermen, head back home and make myself 7 end crystals. I then need to make the same amount of book and quills. Again, not having the right amount of resources, I made instead of chickens and squid for feathers and ink sacs. And I tell you, when you're in need of a certain mob will drop desperately, it'll just never appear, and then when you don't need it, it'll appear. Does this happen to anyone else, or am I just crazy? Wait, hang on. Do my eyes deceive me, or are those clucking chickens? Oh my goodness. I'm just gonna say, I spent this entire day just looking for 2 really easy to gather resources. Now, I just need a squid. Day 142. Still looking for squid. I quite literally spend the whole day looking for these guys. I felt like the game was taunting me at this point. Wait, hang on. Yes! Oh my god, finally some squid. Literally on my way back home. Mojang, I would like to sincerely apologize for my complaining about the lack of squid. As you can see, past me was very relieved that I found some squid as well. Now I can go back home and craft these damn book and quills. Day 143. Finally craft my book and quills. Now after I got a few creeper heads for my slotted stuff, yoink, thank you very much. I then started to add what I currently had to my armor first, increasing all the base amount of upgrades by 3. Next was to work on adding a balanced amount of protection for everything. But before doing so, I added another slot upgrades slot through applying 4 dragon heads to my armor, increasing my armor upgrades to 4 now. I then started getting myself sorted to create the all-in-one protection for my armor, and to do so I was going to need to craft 5 different reinforcements 4 times over. First was blast protection, which required molten obsidian poured over a blank template. All the reinforcements require a molten material over a blank pattern, just saying this now so I don't have to repeat myself. Second was melee protection, which used cobalt. Third was magic protection using gold. Fourth was fire protection utilizing seared bricks. And fifth and finally was projectile protection, which was casted from iron. I then decided to cast molten diamonds over some apples to create jeweled apples, because when applied to armor, you're given +1 heart per apple to all your armor pieces. I applied 2 per armor piece, which in turn gave 2 extra hearts per piece, therefore giving me an extra 8 hearts of health. This is kind of busted. I then went in search of resources to add respiration to my helmet and proceeded to get jump scared by drowned hurling tridents at me. I quickly gappled up and flew away. Went in for round 2, killed the trident bearer, got my materials. Day 144. Now the next thing I needed for my armor was depth throw. One of the resources required was prismarine. Look, I'll be honest, I'm happy to fight the dragon, as well as the wither. Not the warden, screw that guy. But going towards an ocean monument was something I was terrified of doing. But all I needed was 1 block of prismarine. How hard could that be? Watch. Even watching this back, I have so much anxiety. This was one of the closest calls to death I think I've had since 100 days. I was so stupid, I didn't clear the mining fatigue from beforehand, drank the milk, which then killed my invisibility. I was able to mine a couple blocks, but tanked half my health because I'm an idiot. Panicked as I was, I managed to get out with at least 1 block of prismarine. However, I needed 2 actually. Thankfully, the other one was just sitting on the water for me to collect. Now that I had all the materials needed, I was able to apply 2 levels of depth strider to my boots. Day 145 to 146. Now that my armor has been upgraded to where I'm comfortable with using it, there was another thing I wanted to add to my armor, but I'll have to get that later. I'm now on the look for resources for current tools. One which is some rabbit's feet for an ability called Lucky, which has 3 levels. I also get some more feathers. This is something regarding my armor, and you can probably take a guess as to what it is. Thankfully, I have most of the other resources needed after the previous 100 days. So I just applied all the stuff to get max lucky on the tools needed. Thankfully, once you use the ability slot to apply the ability, it only requires you to add onto it with the other resources. Don't need to worry about wasting another 2 ability slots. Also, if you couldn't guess what I needed those feathers for, it was for feather falling for my boots. I wanted to get the highest level possible. Only thing is, remember when I struggled to find enough squid for ink sacs? I'm now stuck in the same predicament, but this time for bloody chickens. I spent the next day and a half looking for enough chickens and their feathers to get the amount I needed. And turns out, feather falling is damn expensive within Tinkers. I was so desperate that I opened my mini-map to see if I was able to use it to enable passive mob icons on it. But either it didn't exist or I just missed it. But I wasn't able to have the passive mob heads on my mini-map. So I resorted to using the debug key boxes to help locate them easier. Day 147 to 148. Finally collected enough feathers for my boots, applied it to my boots, then I started browsing any more potential upgrades and abilities. I found one called Haste, which could be applied to my chest piece. So I applied 5 levels of haste to it so that I could just annihilate blocks that I'm digging. And I wanted to try my luck on mining, excuse the pun, some resources which I left untouched in my strip mine. Which can I say has been a minute. I almost got lost down here, to be honest. I then found some redstone, mined it, and you wanna know what I got from the 6th vein? 48. Damn lucky is busted and tinkers. The funny thing is, I actually did need redstone for what I was trying to do next, as I wanted to get max haste on my pickaxe. And to finally finish off my loadout, I made myself a custom shield, using a tier 4 blazewood shield base. Turns out I needed blaze blood poured onto bloodshroom planks. And while I was at the blaze blood farm, I thought to just AFK for a while until I had a few buckets filled up. I then finally got home, made my blazewood shield base, then poured molten obsidian over it to cast my shield in full. Day 149 to 150. At this point I was fully kitted out to fight the Wither if I really wanted to, but there were a few little extra things I wanted to do. One of these extra bits was to make a full set of slimy armor, and to do so, I needed some very specific items to mix. The main ingredient was molten end slime. I then needed a rabbit's foot, a shulker shell, an elytra, and any mob skull. Why I needed these, I don't exactly know, it was just part of the recipe. So I went off to the desert to get a rabbit's foot, next off to the end realm for a good amount of end slime and a shulker shell. Then went home, melted down my end slime inside my foundry, and started casting the arm pieces to make a full set. Now, regarding the slime skull. Each skull holds a unique attribute to it. It'll either give the player a debuff effect when activated, or have a passive action that's always active. Basically, some really cool abilities you can use as if you were a mob of the skull you were wearing. So, which skull did I use? I casted it with a skeleton slime skull. I thought this would nullify all wither damage and make the wither boss easy to fight. Turns out, that wouldn't be the case, because the skull did the opposite. It instead allowed me to inflict wither damage and make withers pass it to me also. However, I had the slimy armor made, and that was another goal done for these 200 days. I then proceed to make another set of Tinkers-based armor called Traveler's Armor, which is essentially the best earliest game armor you could make. There's a lot of customization you can do with this armor set, but I'll leave you guys to figure out what you can do with it. Afterwards, I set out to try and find sweet berries as I wanted to do something to pass the time, or more actually have someone. You may have seen little critters roaming around my world. There are many of these guys, and I asked a friend which one I should have as a companion. He gave me an answer, I just needed sweet berries. So, looking around for sweet berries in the biome I thought they would be in, I found this little hut in a tiger forest. What I didn't know was there would be a literal angry wizard inside. He applied blindness to me, to which I booked it and flew out. Hey, also if you watched up to this point and are enjoying, and you want to see more, then let me know by liking the video as well as subscribing. Helps me a lot. Takes less than 5 seconds, and you can always unsubscribe later. Thank you again, now back to the video. Day 151. After traversing the area around previously, I came across another one of these wizard huts. But this time, I actually played it safe, and after deducing where some loot would be, I found a chest with 2 sweet berries in it. I was then off to find my little guy that I would proceed to love forever. But before doing so, I found a pillager outpost, and weirdly enough, I didn't see any pillagers anywhere. So I looted the chest and found, in my opinion, the best goat horn sing. Now, not to waste my 2 sweet berries to my name, I quickly bone mealed them up, and now I was off to find my forever little guy. I went towards the jungle as this is where they spawned, and thankfully enough, one was already spawned in and they was sleeping. I tamed me a red panda, but weirdly enough, I had to wait till night to do so, probably because it was asleep? I'm not too sure. However, while I was waiting around, I grabbed myself some resources for a build I wanted to construct. Night finally happened, and I finally took my little red panda companion home. Day 152. I finally named my new red panda friend Jasmine, thanks to a friend of mine. After some bonding and taking screenshots, I then head into the Nether realm, mainly because I needed to gather some more wither skeleton skulls, so I had them on hand prior. Finally got my 3 skulls, this way I'm not worrying about them later. Day 153. After getting back home, I start to look into upgrading whatever is possible onto my current toolset. For set upgrades, I needed glistening melons and some ichor slime to make a congealed block of it. Mined some blocks of amethyst for upgrade requirements, then entered into the Nether again. I needed a single ghast tear as I had none. I also happened to come across a zombie piglin with a backpack on it playing one of my favorite music discs, so I killed it. However, beforehand, I dug myself a hole as to not deal with the horde of zombie piglins. I isolated myself with this piglin, however, I was stuck with piglin aggro. I was able to get my other side disc, now I just had to get out of the Nether without any piglins trying to attack me. Okay, just trap these guys, dig out and bye! However, I ironically almost get half health by just a regular piglin as I'm leaving for home. That wasn't very nice. I then add the upgrades being Necrotic, Smite, and Swift Strike. Day 154. Alright, today I wanted to build Jasmine her own home. So I set off to gather necessary materials such as bamboo, jungle logs, and saplings, red sand, and a various amounts of terracotta. Day 155, still collecting resources. I went to collect some sand as well, but the way I was collecting could have been done more efficiently. So I headed home, grabbed my excavator, and started going ham and ripping into this desert I was in. Efficiency is key. Day 156 to 158, after spending 2 days collecting resources, I start to prepare them to build a home for my beloved Jasmine. With all the sand I collected, I put it into the smeltery to be melted and cast it into clear glass. You see, I could have installed a resource pack to allow for what I'm doing, but this series is based around tinkers, so anything tinkers related I will use, and clear glass is essentially a connecting texture variation of glass. You'll soon see what I mean. I then start to flatten out an area and terraform a decent amount for Jasmine's home to be plotted down on. After, I grab some deep slate, cut it into the polished and chisel variations and built an outline. With a rough idea of how big this home for Jasmine was going to be, I start placing down some blocks to make her habitat. Half of it would be a mix of red desert and badlands, and the other would be jungle. I wanted to use podzol as the jungle area's flooring, but I fumbled the way I was going about it. But then I remembered I had a silk touch shovel and a patch of podzol that I had generated a while ago. So I dug at the podzol, replaced the mycelium that was in the way, and replaced it with the podzol I had dug before. Next I started to convert most of the bamboo I had into blocks of bamboo, and then those into bamboo planks. This is when I tried my hand at a bit of detailing and built a few small things to tie the build together. Afterwards, to finalize Jasmine's home, I started to build a barrier with a big open walkway. Now you remember the clear glass I spoke about earlier? This is what I'm using it for. And after a whole 2 days of resource collecting and another 2 days of building, I had finally made Jasmine a nice home away from home. Day 159. I started this day off by just doing some general house cleaning. I then started to do some research into what upgrades and abilities I wanted to add to my longbow. Firstly, I added a slotless upgrade, and after a whole day of trying to figure out what I wanted, I was indecisive about what I wanted. Day 160. So around this time, my game crashed. But don't worry, I didn't lose the world or any progress. It however did roll back all my advancements. I wasn't trying to get all the Tinker's advancements, but that might be something for a potential 300 days? Maybe. Now after having looked at what I wanted on my longbow, I needed to go to the Nether for a necrotic bone. Because of course I only needed one. I didn't have the one. So, I then proceeded to spend the majority of the day just running back and forth between two fortresses to spawn some little skeletons. I eventually got the one bone I needed and applied the necrotic effect to my longbow. The next thing I added was piercing. After this, I was stumped and did some research. Now, as to not waste time, I took what little gravel I had left and used it on my extractinator in hopes of some good resources. But along with getting some shinies from the gravel, I was actually after flint. Sure, I could have spent some extra time to work on an automated milling station to do a 1-to-1 conversion, or making a tool that gave me fortune-like drops, but I wanted my shinies, okay? Can you blame me? Anyway, afterwards I was needing feathers as I was needing arrows for my longbow, as I didn't want to use my bow for the wither fight. Spoiler alert, I regret making this decision and you'll soon see later why. And now time to hunt some chickens. Day 161. After spending another whole day hunting chickens, I eventually went back home to do some more extracting for resources. It's kind of addicting, I'll be honest. I eventually got enough feathers, flint and sticks to make a couple stacks of arrows. And as some final prep work for today, I cast some molten gold over some apples to make, if you guessed the gapples, you get a star. Day 162. Today I started getting around to brewing some potions that I think will be necessary for the wither fights. Again, I heavily over-prepared for this fight, but then proceed to get overwhelmed. Because again, I'm not a hardcore player, but I respect all those that play it and have done very long-term worlds. Like, seriously, this stuff is nerve-wracking. However, I am learning a lot of valuable things that I didn't actually know Where was I? Oh yeah, potions. I remember that I had lots of instant 2 health pots from my various end-busting adventures, so I turned some of those into splash pots for 2 reasons. 1, for myself of course, but mainly 2, because the wither is undead. Using pots of healing will damage it, however pots of instant damage will heal it. Learned that little fact a while ago, but for all the Minecraft newbies watching, there's a little tip for you. Spoiler, I didn't actually get around to using this knowledge against the wither. Again, you'll see soon. I then later realized I had many other pots from when I fought the dragon in the last 100 days, so I ultimately decided to put potion brewing on hold for time being. I then started to alloy manure to have some spare for later on. Afterwards, I alloyed an absolute ton of heptazine as I would need it to cast repair kits as everything within my current loader was made of it. Day 163. After spending some time individually casting repair kits, I thought of a better way. First, I poured all the remaining heptazine into an ingot gauge, collected all my casting tables, placed the 3 I had, then placed the ingot gauge in the middle, adding some faucets, and bam, 3-way repair kit casting. However, I needed an extra 2 repair kit casts. There we go, now I can do the thing. Now with 23 repair kits in my pocket, I was set for a while. Said hello to Jasmine. Afterwards, I constructed a semi-auto extractinator setup. I simply put a hopper facing into the extractinator, put a sugar box on top, filled it with sand, and done. I did however do some manual extracting as this process was painfully slow. Day 164. Was about to do some gapple casting again, but got jump scared by a zombie piglin coming out of my portal. Started casting my gapples, and went to Nether to AFK for Blaze Blood once again. I've actually lost track of how many times I've been to and from out of Nether. I'm gonna say a good majority of it was for Blaze Blood, but I then proceeded to AFK the whole day away just for a few buckets of blazing blood. Day 165. Hey, wanna guess where I go again? Yeah, I'm back here again. Don't worry, it's just something different though. I'm just here to get some resources. I was mainly after gold, but I ended up getting quartz as well. I head back home and proceed to spend the whole day at my creeper farm. I would have AFK'd, but I would have been able to get more drop if I manually killed them. So that's what I did. Day 166. I'm in the Nether again. And again, for resources, gold, cobalt, quartz. But I then went ancient debris blasting. Day 167. Casting more gapples and gave my smeltery a spring clean. This was more because I wanted to clear out any molten materials in case they alloyed with my ancient debris that I smelted. Of course, I needed to swap out the lava for blazing blood, which I did. Oh, but Mace, why don't you put your ancient debris into the foundry? I only want the ancient debris. No byproduct. Plus, I gave my ancient scrap from the smeltery. Afterwards, I made a full set of diamond armor to then upgrade to netherite. Thankfully, I was in a version that didn't require me to use upgrade templates. That would have been much more painful. Making this armor set was mainly to complete my armor set collection. I wasn't going to go as far as to make every armor set possible, however, that could be a pretty fun challenge. Not sure if Tinkers can be combined with trims though. Science for later. Afterwards, and speaking of Tinker's armor, I did some research on Tinker's armor as I had a thought, and that was to swap my armor parts around. What I mean, make the plate armor parts out of manure and the mail parts out of heptazine. Day 168, and after looking into it, I decided to do just that. It would mainly be for better durability, armor toughness, and better traits. But before getting to alloy these metals, first I had to prop my full netherite armor set onto an armor stand for display purposes. Now after having alloyed some manure, I cast the plate armor pieces and replaced the heptazine parts with said pieces. I sadly wasn't able to recover the heptazine plate pieces, but thankfully all the upgrades and such stayed on my armor. And after accidentally holstering my pickaxe into my netherite armor's display, I had to break it. This is when I realized that even a full manure armor set, the strongest metal in Tinker's construct, was still weaker than netherite. I was really quite shocked actually, but I still stuck with my Tinker's armor as that was the whole point of these 200 days. I then alloyed my heptazine mail pieces, then replaced the manure mail pieces. There wasn't actually much of a difference from my previous armor than I actually thought there might have been. Only thing was a durability increase and inverted colors, which was just brighter purple, I think? Colorblind moment. And lastly, I fixed up my semi-auto collection area for my smeltery, so it wasn't just dirt. Now it actually fits within the base. Day 169 to 170. Now at this point, I realized I didn't have a tool with a silk touch effect on it. So I recreated my current pickaxe again, but to be built with silk touch in mind. But to get a silk touch, or silky as it is in Tinker's, I needed silk cloth. And to get this, I needed to alloy rose gold and pour that onto cobwebs. I would need to do this 5 times. Rose gold? Easy. Can do that later. Getting spiders to spawn when I needed them, I would need to wait until nightfall and hope I'm lucky enough to get cobwebs needed. I tried my hand at going into caves first, but thought it would be faster during the night. Thankfully, I went towards my stronghold area and just went through the end. High end, by end, I waited till night, killed as many spiders as I could, and was able to obtain a couple of cobwebs and a lot of string. Now at this time, I thought I could simply craft cobwebs because of a mod named Quark. Unfortunately, Quark doesn't allow this. And in general, I learnt you can't even craft cobwebs, which sucked. I'm just glad Tingers adds cobwebs as a potential drop from spiders, so if you're confused, that's why. I then spent the next day just fixing up my inventory and backpack, also casted some obsidian repair kits as I was only just noticing how low my shield was, all the while waiting for nightfall again. Day 171. At this point I realized my shield wasn't equipped with any upgrades or abilities, so I've done what I've done countless times in these 200 days and applied slotless upgrades first. I then went back to the Nether for more ghast tears, and found a bastion that I decided to raid. Wasn't much good loot as the one I found was one of the lesser ones. After adding the slotless upgrades needed, I made my shield diamond tier, just to increase the overall durability. Day 172. Now, regarding some of the upgrades for my shield, I noticed there's a freezing upgrade that can be applied, but I needed powdered snow, and I was nowhere near any, so I had to travel a fair bit away just for a few buckets of this stuff. However, I think I remember doing some research later on saying that this effect won't actually work on the wither, but at this point in time, I didn't know. Adding the freezing effect to my shield, I also added max level haste to my matic. Day 173 to 174. After having added max level haste to my matic, I wanted to test it out. And what better way than to decimate the desert east of my base. However, after a while I noticed my durability becoming abysmal. But after digging some sand for a bit, I went back and extracted it all for some trainees. I then started to make some emerald reinforcements, which was essentially unbreaking and tingers. This was to go my matic in a little bit. After spending some time casting the reinforcements, I used a gapple to convert my already existing ability slot into 2 extra upgrade slots. This then allowed me to essentially give Unbreaking 2 to my matic. I then tried to make some of my tools diamond tier, but forgot that needed an upgrade slot to do so. Also, remembering I wanted Silk Touch, I rushed over to the same desert again to hunt spiders, and while trying to get the remaining cobwebs I needed, I thought I'd try and get some music discs for extra slotless upgrades. I was able to get a couple in the end, and I was also successful in getting the cobwebs needed to get Silk Touch sorted. Realistically, it would have been easy if I had gone to the library in the stronghold, or gone into an abandoned mineshaft to collect cobwebs. But I didn't and will remember for next time. I collected the rose gold I had made some time ago, melted it in the foundry, and poured it over the cobwebs to create silk cloth. I now have a Silk Touch tool. After, I casted some iron reinforcements to add projectile protection to my shield. And for another addition to my shield, I gave it blast protection. Day 175. I began to cast some more blast protection onto the already existing blast protection that's already on my chest plates. And speaking of adding onto protection, I also cast some projectile protection for my helmets. I then do the same last 2 things, adding projectile protection to my boots and blast protection to my leggings. I'm also wanting my shield to be as tanky as possible, so I added the in-between of Unbreaking 1 and 2 to it. And using one of my newly obtained music discs, I use it to apply a slotless upgrade to my Silk Touch pickaxe. This is so that I can add any potential upgrades later when need be. I then try and get a chicken coop sorted. I would have made a farm, but a couple of things. 1, I wasn't really bothered to not have chickens, as it was mainly for the eggs. 2, I did not want to go out looking for chickens. I've done enough of that already. I was lucky enough to get a chicken from throwing a few eggs. Afterwards, I wanted to try my hand at adding onto my already enchanted fishing rod. I was really hoping to get either Unbreaking or Luck at the Sea, couldn't care what level, but after watching my XP slowly drop to 10 levels, it was apparent I wasn't getting what I wanted anytime soon. Day 176. The next day, I went to the creeper farm to try and get some easy levels, and I thought of something. So I tried having my max level lucky pickaxe in my offhand, with my max level lucky cleaver in the other. And what I thought to try and do was amplify my XP gain from killing the creepers, and maybe get some extra gunpowder out of it too. And after doing this for a whole day, I don't think it actually did much now I think about it, but for science, it was worth a try. Day 177. Spending a little more time at the creeper farm, I started looking into molten metals again. This was because I wanted to try and make another longbow. I decided on manure limbs and the wattle grip and just a regular bowstring. This was just so I had a much stronger bow for the wither fights. However, later I would soon regret the use of the longbow. Day 178, and of course, with any new tool or weapon, I've got to do my slotless upgrade nonsense, so let me just... There we go, now I can upgrade things. The thing with my newly made longbow is that it's a carbon copy of my last one upgrades-wise, adding power and necrotic, which I needed to go to Nether to get some things. You know, ichor, witherbones, ghast, those things. But as I was leaving, I got ambushed by a hoglin and a piglin. Now that wasn't very nice. Day 179 to 180. Having got back home with the materials, I added necrotic, then added pierce. I stopped to have a look at both my old and new bows to compare and contrast. Again, an almost carbon copy, just a few differences. I then farted around my home for a while, just sorting some things out. Went to say hello to Jasmine. Hey Jazz. I then went to the desert. I dug sand mainly to kill time as I waited till nightfall for mobs to spawn. I needed to kill skeletons in hopes for them to drop their arrows. So that's what I did for the whole night. Went into the next day collecting some more sand, went home, and used all of my Extractinator for even more shinies. And similar to what I did back on day 160, instead of using gravel, I used sand. Now as to why I use sand and not gravel on my Extractinator, well, aside from the blocks that come with it in generating within the world, silt and slush, yes, just like in Terraria, spawn in very small veins, and you've got to hope and pray that they give you something out of them, whereas with sand, or gravel even, you're able to get the same stuff. Sand, I believe, from memory, just has a slightly bigger loot table than gravel, but that's why I use sand over any other blocks. But after all that extracting, I was able to get over 2.5 stacks of flints. Day 181. Today I start coming up with a plan of action and attack for the wither fights. Again, meticulously over-preparing. I was basically trying to figure out what should be in my hotbar at all times. This is something I will need to learn eventually, which is figuring out a system in where I figure out what's best for combats. But learning all the ins and outs will have to wait till another day. I was just sticking with what I felt comfy with, which was my cleaver and bow in slots 1 and 2, pots in the middle, and gapples and food at the end. Now with regards to sophisticated backpacks, I remember seeing a while ago on an SMP where you could have pots be automatically replenished into your inventory after use. And upon trying to figure that out, I had no clue what I was doing. Did I look it up? No. Why? Honestly, I wasn't really too bothered at the time. Plus, getting better with inventory management for combat is something I'd like to get better at. I then started to do some potion brewing, and from memory, I believe I made some strength 2, instant health 2, and regen. Some being splash, some being regular, and another thing I've got to learn is potion brewing. Day 182, for some of the potions I was brewing, I needed glowstone. So I was off to Nether, grabbed some glowstone. With glowstone in hand, I went back home, finished brewing some more potions. I had a lot of fun with this. I got to learn what materials affect what with brewing. I say this as I don't know enough about brewing in Minecraft to know anything about potions. Day 183, need to repair my elytra, so I spent some time at the creeper farm, and when I was finishing up, I noticed something very familiar in the water. To my surprise and frustration, I had an amethyst geode within swimming distance of my base. Oh, how nice this would have been if I had known this was here. Oh, the joyous soul I would have had to get amethyst. Oh boy, if you can't tell, I'm quite annoyed at myself. This would have been so handy to have in the last 100 days, but I digress. I then tried my hand at getting some enchantments to my fishing rod again, and having watched my levels deplete, I was once again unsuccessful. After that, I had the idea of terraforming an area near my base to make it nice and flat to fight the wither. So I went to the mushroom island that sat directly in front of my base and started leveling it. Day 184, and after having started terraforming to create a boss fighting arena, I proceeded to spend the whole day just leveling and filling any holes needed. I didn't want to go too big nor too small. Day 185, I continued to expand the area that soon would become a desolate wasteland. You know, because the wither fires skulls that can explode almost 99% of the blocks within the game. I was also just trying to waste time as I didn't have the confidence to fight the wither just yet. Day 186 to 187. I collected some gunpowder to replenish my rocket stash. This is because I went through to the end realm to do some last minute end busting for fun. Looting and scooting, slaying shulkers, collecting elytra, flying through the void, you know, all that fun stuff. And after a fun adventurous end bust, I went back home. Day 188. Went back into the Nether, did some ancient debris blasting, all the while collecting more cobalt and some other resources, and after coming back home, I was greeted to a zombie piglin in the middle of my base. Sorry mate, you gotta go. Didn't expect to one-hit kill the guy though. Huh. Day 189. With all the ancient debris I blasted for in the previous day, I needed to smelt it down in my smelter as I was getting more out of it rather than using the foundry. But before doing so, I needed to use my blazing blood fuel to smelt down the ancient debris as per usual, so I yoinked what I had in my foundry and replaced the current lava fuel in my smelter with the blazing blood. Melted down the ancient debris, poured it into an ingot gauge, and combined some molten cobalt with the molten debris into the alloy to make, you guessed it, manulin. Psst, if you want to see a video on what molten alloyed metals can do, let me know in the comments below. I needed the manulin to cast some repair kits as right now my armor is looking worse for wear. I then casted some more as backup, so I'm not having to constantly keep casting repair kits in the further future. Afterwards, I proceeded to spend the rest of the day emptying out my foundry because, oh my goodness, was it just full of so much crap. Day 190. And due to just the sheer amount of molten materials within my foundry, I proceeded to spend the entirety of today just emptying it. I also only realized a few things as I was doing this. 1, the foundry can actually hold a lot of stuff. 2, it takes a bit for molten materials to be casted and cooled down. And 3, this was just tedious. I could have made this whole process a lot smoother if I automated it or increased the amount of drains. Again, something to consider for another time. Day 191. Nothing special. Back to Nether. AFK for some more blazing blood. Killed some more wither skeletons. AFK'd some more. And back home to enjoy a nice sunset. Day 192. I fixed the collection area of my smeltery, reinstalling the third chute that I apparently removed, melted down some iron, and flew off to dig up a whole bunch of sand for the rest of the day. Day 193. Went to collect one of my many beds I've used in these last 200 days from atop my creeper farm. I then melted down some more iron, but this time being in its raw block form. Then went back to the desert to mine even more sand. Day 194. After 3 shulker boxes of sand, I headed back home, and with said sand-filled shulker boxes, I mass extracted for shinies. If you guessed that, A+ for you. And by this, I meant that I spent the rest of the day just grinding out all the shinies and anything else that I could. Day 195. I was greeted by a wandering trader looking to sell his wares. I kindly said no and bid him farewell to the afterlife, along with his trusty steeds that I'm calling Thing 1 and Thing 2. Anyway, I went and paid Jasmine a visit as I haven't seen her for a little while. Hello, Jasmine. Farmed some sugarcane, planted some sweet berries for Jasmine as well, and I finally decided to look into making myself a karma, which is essentially just a hoe and shovel combined. Wasn't making it out of anything fancy as I didn't see myself using it every day. Proceeds to use fancy materials. It was made from a mix of low to mid-tier materials, iron, cobalt, and the wattle. Again, fancy materials. Did some terraforming around my base, just to clean things up a bit, chopped down some giant mushrooms, and killed a skeleton. Wait, what? Not sure how that guy spawned in. I think it may have been these grass blocks, not entirely sure. Any Mushroom Island experts or mob spawning geniuses out there? Can you let me know how that could have happened, please? Thanks. Day 196. Continued terraforming as I saw a cave just sitting under the side of my base. Covered that up and started to work on my new wheat farm. Nothing fancy, just enough to get me that sweet, sweet bread. And what's better than 1 5x5 of wheat growing? That's right, 2. And you know what's better than 2? Well, not 3 because I didn't have enough. Oh, that was so much funnier to write when I actually wrote it, my god. However, it started to rain, so it was time to fish for a bit, and I ended up fishing for the rest of the day. Day 197. I went to go check out my chicken farm with my singular chicken. I know, great farm. Truth be told, I completely forgot about this just for now, collected the egg, threw it, and nothing. Anyway, I started to prepare for the wither fight as I'd be fighting it within the next day or so. But past me had probably one of the most stupidest ideas ever. What's that, you may ask? I decided it would be best to put all my non-combat gear into a shulker box and then proceed to hide them underground for the fights. I'm not going to go into further detail as you'll soon see what happened. But I spent some time organizing my stuff and realized I'm forgetting one crucial ingredient: soul sand. Got enough to last me a good while, I think. Went home, put away some backpacks I wasn't using, and back to the other island to sort some more stuff out. Back to the base to do some more prep work, and then finally back to the other island making final preparations. And here's the icing on the cake for my stupidity. I covered the sugar boxes with my belongings in them with cobblestone. Yeah, it wasn't my best move, I will admit. Day 198. Okay, today was the day. I took some deep breaths, preparing to face my next biggest challenge in hardcore Minecraft. I was about to fight the Wither, and I'm gonna be honest, I'm surprised by the outcome of this fight. So enjoy the mess that is me fighting the Wither. Let's do it.
I've lost this fight. I've lost this fight. My bow's not strong enough. I've put my stuff all in that one. I'm so stupid.
At this point, I thought all hope was lost. That was until I pulled this move. With each landing slash upon the wither, I withered its health down, little by little. Phase 2 began, and within an instant, the boss before me was taken off its throne, claiming me as the victor. And just like that, I'd beaten the wither. And as a mental note to make for myself, next time I fight any boss with Tinker stuff, I'm never using the longbow again! It was the worst thing to use in that fight. It might have been better against the dragon, but not the wither. Also, past me finally realizes that the great idea of storing my stuff away under some cobblestone was the worst decision possible.
I thought the wither, if the wither had enough, of its explosive heads, it could, just blast it and kill it. Turns out that wasn't the case.
Oh, and another thing is I didn't even use my shield that entire fight. Yeah, but I can confidently say that I've now beaten the wither in hardcore Minecraft. Day 199. Oh, that wasn't the end, by the way. We still have 2 more days to go. Today, I just organized some stuff. And you remember when I was melting down all that iron blocks? Yeah, now I think about it, maybe that was fate telling me, hey, you're gonna beat the wither, you just don't know it yet. Because with full confidence, I built a beacon. I did have to gather up some more iron quickly. But I almost built an almost max level beacon, placed it down, applied resistance, and called it that complete. Wasn't the goal, may I add, but it was something that I was able to accomplish. Day 200. We're finally here. Took a screenshot for the thumbnail, went to say hello to Jasmine for one last time, did some tree chopping, checked in my chicken coop, had another egg, but even after hitting this milestone, the baby chicken RNG gods couldn't bestow me another chicken. Collected some gravel, sand and clay to cast some more seared bricks. This was so that I could upgrade my smeltery once more. And with all that being said and done, to everyone that is still watching up to this point, I have survived 200 days in hardcore modded Minecraft. Hey, thanks for watching through all that. I do hope you enjoyed. If you are wanting me to do a 300 days, let me know in the comments. But just so you know, I won't be doing anything crazy. Beating the wither? That was stressful enough. So don't get any ideas. I'm not fighting the warden. But I think I can do something pretty cool for you all, that is if you are keen. Again, thank you all so much for watching, and thank you for your patience on this one. I'll catch you in the next one. See ya!